The critical findings were that Shark Bay has got some of the most significant carbon stocks in seagrass meadows in the world. Somewhere between 1 and 2.5% of all the carbon stored in seagrasses globally occurs in Shark Bay. The other very important thing that we found was that once that seagrass meadow was lost following a heatwave event in 2010-11, that we lost between 2 and 9 million tons of carbon with that seagrass meadow. So that represents an enormous contribution of carbon back into the atmosphere, equivalent to the carbon that will be emitted from 1.5 million cars driving for a year, the emissions from two power plants running over a year. So that's a very significant amount of carbon that goes back to the atmosphere and then has a positive feedback effect by inducing more warming in the atmosphere by putting that carbon dioxide back. If we have ongoing heatwave events, which we expect to occur and to increase much more frequently over the next century, that we can expect a lot more of these losses. Those losses will therefore put an enormous amount of carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. That, as I said before, will have a positive feedback effect on climate change. And so it indicates to us that we really need to start to deal with managing these ecosystems for the future. Managing global change is quite difficult. We're used to managing seagrass meadows on a local scale to things like nutrient pollution or dredging or boat moorings. How do we manage on a global scale something which is happening on an enormous scale? It suggests two things have to happen. The first is that because we know these global pressures are going to be occurring, we have to reduce the additional pressure that's coming from local factors. So we need to keep the emphasis on managing those local impacts. But in addition, we've got to think about how can we make these systems more resilient to these sorts of heatwave events, which we know are going to continue to occur more frequently in the future. Some of the ways we can deal with that are, for example, trying to repopulate these places that have been damaged with genotypes, types of plants which are more resistant to these sort of heat pressures, or trying to predict where the next heat wave will occur and transplanting into those locations genotypes or plants from other locations which are already warmer and therefore we think would be more resistant to them. This is quite a significant change in management practice, but it's the sort of thing that people globally are starting to say we need to start thinking about.